folks. Welcome to another edition of the Ominous Hour. Boy, just every day seems to come up with something new I need to talk about. So bear with me if you follow my channel and can't keep up. Sorry, it's kind of the sign of the times. Many people are saying time is moving quicker now, and seems to be the case. Okay. In fact, we're going to be talking more about time again today. Let's introduce the topic, and that will tie us to the pictures, and we'll take a look at what this art AI has done for us. This talk is going to be titled "The Implications of Infinite Time-Space. Better Voices from Futures Past as Trinities and Infinities Dance with To-Be or Ought-To-Be's." Okay, what am I talking about there? Well, let's look at the picture first. Let me get the whole thing out so you can see it. This is basically what it gave me when I told it to draw Trinities and Infinities dancing with To-Be or Ought-To-Be's. Interesting. So some of the interesting pieces of this is it clearly has an idea that the future is all about Asians, all about Chinese, all about groups doing things in synchronicity, except for this one. But you can see that these two pretty much, I mean, this is like synchronized dancing in idealistic high-end neighborhood, probably in Singapore or China. And this is kind of a similar deal in a very nice looking school arena with children dancing in their uniforms and all happy. Interestingly enough, it gave us this one contrasting one of a bunch of samurai transformers, I would call them, futuristic samurai transformers, all ready to go do battle or something. And then this last one, kind of interesting, a more cartoonish one, again with the typical, what do they call that style of comic art, the Asian style, typical Japanese, Korean, Chinese art. It puts some titling here. Trinities, spelled wrong and different than I spelled it, and infinities. And so maybe, I don't know, these mostly look like female characters that maybe have some prototypical titties that the art AI found amusing and to call it into note. But I thought fairly interesting stuff. It was prompted by that. Tells you something about the art AI's idea of the future, maybe. Okay, so where are we going today? Well, a lot of my content lately has been driven by revelations I've put together about how time-space, and I purposely reverse it. Instead of calling it space-time, I call it time-space, works. And so I'll give you a brief review of that before we launch into the subject of the day. Is when you figure out this, there are a lot of implications that go with it. And it's kind of mind-boggling. And some of the things that I have mentioned in the past, I need to update. And one of those is basically what I've been telling you about the higher self. The idea of a higher self and the lower self and how basically the versions of you are work. Okay, but before I do that, I want to cover something interesting that I noticed the other day. I was looking for information about a set of books that I really found interesting at the time, and now it's like, wow, when I think back about those books, that was like, whoa, very closely tied to what I'm teaching you now. Talking about a series of books by an author, science fiction fantasy author, Robert Lynn Asprin. He was very, very popular, basically from about the time I was a teenager till, well, interestingly enough, he died in 2008. And let's take a look at some stuff, because the main bunch of his work, he's known for a series of novels called Thieves' World, which is a fantasy universe. That was kind of his first big success. And it was came about the same time as role-playing games. I mean, the paper role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons were becoming popular, and some of the games of that era, or the focus of certain role-playing, was more around his Thieves' World novels. And this was kind of an idea that basically there was this city where effectively the thieves were like the heroes. They were the ones that kept everything going in spite of the government or whoever was in charge of this city. And, you know, kind of a dystopian, very dystopian for the era, look at fantasy, which was part of what was going on at the time. There was a definite trend towards counterculture going on in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where narratives were shifting, and all of a sudden the most popular, the leading edge science fiction and fantasy was starting to become more dystopian. Less of the variety of, you know, a Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings variety, to being something which was idolizing essentially kind of questionable characters. And, you know, even something like a Star Wars sort of did that, in that one of the big heroes was Han Solo, who was a smuggler, a criminal. And glorifying crime is something that I think, looking back, we can all agree was part and parcel of why this world is falling apart right now, and therefore feeds into everything I'm telling you about how time and space works. So just looking into this, I found some interesting stuff here, though, because this series that I was most interested in was this one called Myth Adventures. I'm not going to do any plot spoilers or anything, but basically the idea of these books, the first book was about a young magician, trainee, who it's a very similar plot line to a lot of other books, by the way. Was in training, and his master got killed or something, and this new cat happened by, this demon named Oz, and took him under his wing. Said, "Oh, I'll be your you can be my Padawan learner now, if you will." Okay, very common themery here with a lot that was going on. Now, this was in 1978, so about the same time frame as the first. In fact, let's just check that. When was the first Star Wars movie? No, not that one. I mean, the original Star Wars movie. See, even that, they're starting to give us bullshit answers, right? That's not the first Star Wars. Wow. And people are finding that and thinking that that was the first Star Wars. In fact, asking, is Star Wars 1977 the first one? So that's the year that the first Star Wars movie came out. Isn't that a coincidence? Let's see when this other novel came out. 78. So 77, 78, right about the exact same time, all of these stories are hitting that either in science fiction or fantasy are basically this pattern of some young magical kid getting pulled into an adventure where they're basically teaming up with some pretty stanky characters. Okay, so it starts out like that, and it's really a funny series, and it went on, adding more characters from different dimensions, because the idea of this series was that, well, you know, kid, you're in this medieval world, and you were kind of training as a magician, doing very simple things like, you know, lighting a light bulb and stuff like that. But your teacher was only showing you the smallest bit of the truth, which is there's a whole bunch of dimensions, different worlds occupied by different kinds of characters. One of which is the dimension Perv, which is where this demon came from, and one of the recurring jokes is that he gets unhappy, gets mad at anybody who calls him a pervert. Says, no, we're pervex. So this is it is pretty, you know, it's pretty entertaining, comical. I'm surprised it didn't stay popular. In fact, I came to find out that these books, although there were about, quite a few in the series, interestingly enough, continued by a woman that I believe was the guy's second wife, but is not mentioned as such anywhere, which is kind of strange, because they collaborated on basically a continuation of these books until his death in 2008. Okay, and basically each book would add new characters and new dimensions. And one notable one I'm going to point out, well, actually I'll mention some of them. Each dimension was kind of like adding, well, this is where the vampires live, and basically normalizing vampire life, or werewolf life, or whatever these other characters were. That's just the way we do it here. One of them that they introduced, one called Little Myth Marker, introduced a character from a universe where basically the adults were children. And this one, if you know what Little Miss Marker was, this was one of the Shirley Temple movies made back in the 1930s. And if you know anything about the Shirley Temple culture, you will know that this was like the big child star of the 1930s, the biggest child star in the era. And she was a singer, a dancer, and would be cast in movies as the lead character against a lot of the famous names of the time. Later on, there were a lot of suspicions that there was something strange going on. And ultimately, Shirley Temple became Shirley Temple Booth and married a guy that ended up being a ambassador or something like that, and being very deeply involved in basically the administrations, especially Democratic administrations of the time. And there were a lot of rumors about how she had been one of the early ones who was subjected to this grooming indoctrination that we know happens in Hollywood, and actually was promoted as being, you know, kind of pedophile heaven. She was always wearing very scanty dresses and dancing, and you know, was kind of sexualized to a great extent. And it's because of Shirley Temple, I believe, that this idea of the kitty pageant got ground. And if you've followed that scene, you probably heard of JonBenet Ramsey, the child that was involved in basically these kitty pageants that was murdered, and they still haven't solved that murder. So there's kind of a really dark underbelly current that this tied into with that. You know, a lot of things just are kind of strange. Interestingly enough, although this was a very popular series at the time for people who like to read, especially science fiction and fantasy, and who enjoyed the combination of that with comedy, very popular, very, very commonly found in the bookstore. These are going out of print. Almost none of them have been released. I think maybe the first couple have been released in ebook form. Maybe not. I'm not even sure of that. Let's just double check. Okay, so there's a couple that made it to Kindle. I guess some of them are available there, but not all of them. And none of the collections. There were collections that came out that had like 2 books that had the first 12 of these in 2 volumes, which would have been pretty convenient. Those are no longer available. I think I bought the very last 2 that could be had for less than a bibliophile price. And they're not being replaced. If you look for a lot of these things, except for the Kindle versions and whatnot, they're basically going out of print. And as you may or may not know, once things are in an ebook form, basically whoever owns the right to the ebook could rewrite it, could make any changes they want, and would be able to introduce a totally different version of the book, which is exactly what's going on in communist China right now. They're taking old things and translating them, and basically with the excuse of, oh, this was in you know, traditional Chinese, and we're updating it to be in simplified Chinese. A lot can be lost in that process, and this is essentially what goes on with cancel culture, and that's been happening a long time, but as we know, it's been accelerating lately. And it's interesting that the guy died May 22nd, 2008 of heart failure at his home in New Orleans. He was found lying on a sofa with a Terry Pratchett novel still open in his hands. He was to have been the guest of honor at Marcon that weekend. Well, that's interesting. I don't know about you, but most people who die of heart failure would have not just been reading a book and suddenly drop dead. Generally, heart failure is like very painful, you've got a time to react to it, and even if you were sleeping, you probably would at least move enough to get off the sofa and make an attempt to get to a phone or something like that. So it's kind of suspect that this guy died when he did. And additionally, The link to the obituary is not working. There's an external link that's supposed to go to his obituary. Myth adventurer passes quietly in the French Quarter. Let's open that link. I think I already... Oh, 404, not found. Isn't that interesting? Now, his presumably second wife that he was collaborating on is still supposedly alive, but her website, well, there's also an official site of these books called the Myth Information official site, which is now dead. And her official website, is no longer available except on archive.org from the Wayback Machine, and has not been updated since, let's see what since August 11th, 2018. What has this woman been up to since then? There's the last version. Her last post was talking about some future work in 2017. Interestingly enough, she's credited with having some involvement with, and you notice this, okay, so she's definitely a woke author. Strong female characters, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of her thing. Furries and that, not, you know, that kind of crowd. She collaborated with a lot of authors over the years, and was somehow involved with Four Horsemen series. Where did I find that? Revelation Cycle, Four Horsemen. Oh, this was maybe her contribution. Slayer of Stars. Okay, so she contributed one short story to that collection that was published in 2019. And basically I haven't seen anything that she's been involved with since 2019. Odd. The going back to Robert, supposedly his works were donated by the family. His heirs donated his archive to the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections at Northern Illinois University. Okay, that's the link to the university. Let's go down to this link, and okay, where is it? Oh, here we go. Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America collection at Northern Illinois University. Where does that take us to? Oh, it's now working. It wasn't working before. Or maybe oh, it's on the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America. Let's see if they list anything about him there. That wasn't working yesterday. That's interesting. There's Robert Aspirin. Let's see what it says about him. Now, maybe this went up yesterday because I searched for it and somebody detected that, and the Wayback Machine said, do I have that, and put it up. Because I think they do archive things. So, inventory of collection links. And interestingly enough, this all went dead 2010. It's only two years after he died, and this archive was supposedly collected there. All of a sudden, it's not there anymore. If this is odd, because, okay, archive from the original on, okay, so let's see what the original is. Okay, the original Did not connect. Potential security issue. Interesting. Why would I get this thing? I have a secure connection. Odd. Let's turn on a VPN and make it more secure. I'll tell them I'm in Denver and see if that helps. No, won't connect. Potential security issue with a university in Illinois? Odd. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rat hole anymore, but to say this is strange. This was extremely popular, in fact so popular that they started making a comic book series out of it. And those are hard to find now. Oddly enough, this series never generated any movies, which you would think it would have, because it's definitely as good a story in its own way as any science fiction or fantasy movie of the era, and the characters were just, you know, you could do a lot with them. They were better than any comedy science fiction or fantasy movie I've ever seen, with maybe the exception of Galaxy Quest. Why didn't they do anything with that? Well, I think it gets to it was too close to inconvenient truths. And we've talked about cancel culture before, and how things that you wouldn't even imagine getting canceled are getting canceled, such as the movie True Lies, really popular Schwarzenegger blockbuster from the 90s, I think, or was it the late 80s, early 90s, that you can't find anymore. No DVDs, never streaming. I think somebody's tried to put it up on YouTube, but there's like multiple versions that are kind of cut differently and weird looking, and you know, it's like one of the, you don't know what is the original one, you know what I mean? And this was you know, a movie that was about basically a CIA agent who kind of really broke a lot of the rules to basically snoop on his wife, who he suspected was having an affair. And it was a funny movie, Jamie Lee Curtis and Schwarzenegger, and odd that would be canceled. You know, it's obviously not because it wasn't popular, like they will tell you, oh well, we're just paring our catalog down because nobody wants to look at that. This is bullshit. There's stuff being canceled, and it's being canceled for a reason. And that ties into the subject of today. So let's review where we have been and where we're at in terms of time-space. Okay? As I told you before, we have been working on perfecting a better version of karma. And that was being tested in a very small test tube of this planet and this chosen species, because it was messing with some very fundamental things that you had to get right before you let it out of the lab. Now, before I talked about what the time implications were, I told you that basically people ask a lot of, well, what's this higher self thing all about? And my explanation is that when you let's get back to the drawing of the Merkaba. Okay, so basically the real you, the part of you that is permanent, is the part that resides in your own universe, these inner four layers, which you're not necessarily aware of. But this is where the experiences that you have that are not pre-planned for whatever universe you're experiencing in, that's where your decisions that are made outside of the standard plan. And this is the weird thing about a simulation multiverse, is that the plan is tested in God's private universe, his private lab first, till it converges, the simulation converges, and then it's tested in a larger state in Lucifer's universe. And when it converges in Lucifer's universe, then it gets out of the lab. God's universe is always just testing the next messianic age. So in God's universe, when you run a simulation, you're basically running it till you converge on the next Messiah, capital M Messiah, which has been these 3 generations that I tell you have been the most recent, from about the 1880s to now. Okay, and that game gets played over and over and over and over again until it converges. Until we find all the characters necessary to make that happen. And that becomes the nucleus of the new time-space. And then it gets tested in Lucifer's universe, because that's when it gets its physical testing. In God's mind, you can make tweaks to it. You can add characters. You can rewind. You can do anything. It's not limited by the laws of physics and chemistry. It's a spiritual universe, a thought universe. So it's good for testing thoughts, but to actually prove that the thoughts work in practice, they have to be retested in Lucifer's physical universe. So, what are the implications of that? The higher self, while we were involved in the testing, before this test was finished, and it was marked, yeah, it converged in Lucifer's universe too. And as I've been telling you, that has happened. The Messiah has fully awakened. The time is right. All of the signs are there, and we're just at this point waiting for some of the prophecies to fall into place so it all matches what was supposed to happen. And the Messiah has to die, and we have to have some end game of what was predicted as the apocalypse, which a lot of people are talking about right now. And wondering if we're in it, and how we're in it, and how long it's going to last, where we are in it. Okay, there's a lot of that chatter going about right now, isn't there? But basically what is happening is that while this experiment has been being repeated, humans who have been born here in the physical universe have been basically playing out a game that was isolated in this lab. Isolated because it's basically being conducted inside a Dyson sphere. That Dyson sphere is a very sophisticated one. It is designed so that you can look out and you don't see it. You see the planets, you see other stars, you see things. You can see whoever controls the Dyson sphere wants you to see. And some of the cyclical phenomena that have been important pieces of, kind of the Easter eggs that humanity was given during this experiment, which has been going a long time, but we've only been playing the latest version very recently. I'll get it in a minute. Okay? This major 3 generations. There have been other minor steps towards that, or even major steps, like the Messianic age of about 2,000 years ago was a pretty big deal. The creation of Christianity and the virtual God Jesus was a big thing. It was one of the first gods that was created that was based on a human character, but not a real human character. before that, the new gods actually were on the earth, and they were actually definitely real people. Moses was a real person. Enoch was a real person. Noah was a real person. Jesus wasn't. Jesus was created out of kind of a combination of characters, only one of which was sort of the Jewish Messiah, who would have been, if the first Jewish revolt, which most people don't know, there was another Jewish revolt that was put down very harshly around in the era of -4 to 6 AD. This was the revolt of Judas the Zealot, who was based in the city of Sepphoris, which is very close to Nazareth and used to be the capital of Galilee until this revolution, until this failed revolt. And that's when Sepphoris was partially destroyed and then kind of de-emphasized and eventually crumbled. And the new capital of Galilee, Tiberias, was anointed as, okay, this is the capital that the Romans approve of. At any rate, this game that we've been playing in here has had a different appearance of what's going on in terms of the higher self and the lower self. So reincarnation has been happening, but it's only been happening within the context of this experiment. So until recently, people have been reincarnating in kind of a progressive, okay, from this point, a linear fashion. And it's only been recently, in the last few decades, that all of a sudden people are saying, wait a minute, there's something weird going on here. I seem to be having some incarnations or past life memories that are more in the nature of future life memories. And that's kind of discombobulating to some people. Well, there's two places that might come from. There was a previous version of this simulation that converged before humanity became the chosen species. And so some people will have had past lives in those previous versions. And some of those species of previous versions seemed barely human. Humanoid would be indistinguishable from us, except for the cultural milieu. Like whoever was the alpha dogs of Egypt, for instance. Ancient Egypt. Not the most recent rebuilding. Darling, I'm in the... Hang on. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of a disaster of a child who needed a bottle and wasn't being listened to by his mother. What's a dad to do? Anyway, we're back. The door's locked now, so hopefully we won't be interrupted again. Trying to pick up where I was. So basically, in the old scheme of things, before this game completed and a new version of time-space was passed, and again, the goal was for a new version was for a woken up Messiah. Waking up may have only required that the universe double in size. Well, we saw that happen last year. And we've been seeing possibly another doubling before that. Because for about the last 32 years, the size of the universe was thought to be there was basically a transition in size. Originally, there were estimates between about 7 billion and 20 billion. and then they honed in on 14.5 billion years, and there might have been other estimates before that based upon earlier observations. We've only had the technology, the ideas to be able to estimate those things for a short time. So it's possible that we have been seeing an expanding universe all this time and we just didn't notice it. And the goal would be, well, if you can at least get the universe to double from what it was before, that's probably good enough. That's awake enough Messiah that we can say, yeah, all right, you don't have to go the whole way. You could die now, as was the case with the Jesus Messiah, or whoever was the real one then. You take the ball far enough to make the football field bigger, and that's good enough to say, well, at least we made a better version of creation than we did before. Let's go ahead and implement this, roll this one out, and then start working on the next one, or even continue working on that messianic age till we develop a bigger one. But at least we've got something that is making the universe bigger. Okay, and it's a simulation process. It is a computer process, effectively. It's a binary process. This is why the Jesus Messiah was said to have lived 32 years. That's a power of 2. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Generally, people don't live to 128 anymore, so 64 is usually all you get. This is the year 64, and just last year we started observing from the James Webb Space Telescope that, whoa, the universe seems to be twice as big as we thought it was before. Something like that, or on the high end of what we'd estimated before. This is how it works. It's a simulation. New versions are implemented whole cloth. After they're tested, you don't have another big bang. You don't play out the whole game again. You just implement the new version. And part of making this all work is to be able to implement the new version with as little discombobulation from the old version to the new one. But there will be discombobulation, such as if you're a cosmologist looking at the stars, all of a sudden everything's not going to make sense anymore because the universe is twice as big as before. You see galaxies that are too mature to fit with the idea of the Big Bang, because there was no Big Bang in this version. Like I said, there was an original version where the Big Bang was the first time space, but it only got so far. And what we are seeing now is vestiges of that. What has to be seen to be consistent with that earlier version. And you can maybe relate if you're used to playing massively multiplayer video games. There will be artifacts of old versions. There will be pieces of it that are there because of continuity issues or shared code between an old version of a virtual reality and the new version. Okay, so what does that mean from the standpoint of higher and lower self? While we were testing this system of reincarnation, we were basically experiencing the higher or lower self that was contained within this experiment. And that was limited to characters that fit into the old version, because the future had not been tested yet. What was going on outside this test environment was basically the same simulation that was running before. Okay, and we needed to be isolated from that. We were playing a new scenario. So people were not incarnating in other species unless they had been before humanity was created in another version of the game. Most people, and this is why most people doing regression or having a near-death experience, psychedelic experience, or a hypnotic regression, recalling past lives, it's pretty much until recently been, okay, just a normal progression. I was such and such person in the 1800s, and that now I'm here. I kind of see where I got there, and it was much more sensible than what people are finding now. This is another evidence that we passed the point at which we're going to get a new time space no matter what. It's a matter of how big it is, whether we're going to double, triple, or whether we're going to get to this point that, well, you know what? It's we've hit this magic spot where there's no stopping now. Expansion is happening so quickly in all directions that there's no beginning, no end of time or space. That's effectively when the game is all done. And that's the point at which we've reached and passed. And we're just getting through kind of the tail end of that with this year. Because this is the year that 64 turns over to 65 for the Messiah. After that, well, okay, maybe he's going to live to 128, but that's not likely for a current human soul vehicle. Wasn't designed to live that long. So I think we pretty much accomplished all we're going to accomplish in this messianic phase. Now, while we were in this experiment, the highest self was limited to go only as far as this game went. So the highest self was based upon experiences of incarnation that were in our past or in the current. And the same with the lower self. If you understand how, let's go back to this view of the Merkaba. So the you is in this central part. That's where the experiences that are really your choices are. The next 4 layers are experiences in spiritual universes. So afterlife experiences in the afterlife of some god or goddess or collective. It's a different virtual reality than the physical universe. The last 4 layers are experience in the physical universe. Lucifer's physical universe, which is where anybody who's watching this now probably is most of the time, because you're having a physical incarnation right now. Okay, the higher self is the self that is here, the real you, but until you get to the God level of consciousness, you aren't aware of that real higher self. The one you're aware of is the copy of this highest self that is existing in the spiritual universe you've been attending, in the heaven you've been to. And that's where you have been planning incarnations, not realizing that what you're working on is not the self that's in that spiritual universe, but you're actually working on the self that is the individual you. And this is where people get confused about, oh, well, I'm not an individual, I'm part of this collective source or whatever. Well, if that's the spiritual universe you've been attending, that's the way it seems to you, that you're part of this hive mind collective in this spiritual universe. No, you're an individual. You're maybe bound into the hive mind, and you don't have any sense of individuality, but actually you do, and eventually you might be able to escape from that hive mind by making decisions that were outside of what the hive mind was saying you should do. And that's the hope that people do have for escaping from the most evil, in my opinion, spiritual universes, the Lilithian universes. Okay, so what's going to be different in the future time space is that we're releasing this thing from the lab. That means that the future is going to continue. We're not going to just keep playing these same generations in this little lab in Lucifer's universe. It's going to be released from this lab, and we are going to be interacting with characters outside of that. We're going to be basically introducing this new time space to others that are outside of this lab and are suddenly observing, whoa, something weird happened. The universe doubled or tripled or doubled or quadrupled or eight-tupled or whatever in size. And they are totally discombobulated because they know it has something to do with what's going on here. And they don't understand it, most of them. They have been playing this game so long that they're basically in the same state that most of humanity has been, of not believing in God, not believing in creation, thinking that, oh, well, everything is just governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, and we know what we can do, we know what we can't do. We don't even have any sense of having an afterlife. Anybody who thinks that they had a paranormal experience that is not consistent with what we know is going to be, institutionalized and deprogrammed so that they won't think such silly things. There are species out there like that. There are other ones that are more spiritual species that know what's going on, but maybe don't know the whys or wherefores, and maybe just know enough to know that, whoa, this is a dangerous planet. There's some people there who's got some weird ideas in their mind that we need to whack. And this is essentially what's going on right now with the whole cancel culture. Because basically we've got to the point where most everybody that has seen what's happened over the last 100 years or so has realized that, whoa, there are things happening in this strange species culturally that are like, and in other ways that are like somebody from the future is sending messages back. Now that's been happening, but the folks that were working on the old version were figuring, well, we're the ones sending those messages back. Our higher selves, our extra dimensional self, is the one that has control of this. And all of a sudden they're realizing that the control has shifted to a further future. Because as a new time space is instituted and implemented after testing, the size of the universe in all four dimensions increases. And so suddenly there's a dimmer past than anybody realized there was, and there is a strange future in which new higher selves are existent, because this is an emergent thing. The whole of time-space was already tested. All the characters determined And when it gets implemented, it's there. There are all these other souls that are part of this big new version of time-space, this bigger multiverse that have just been waiting in God's mind to get a chance to start playing the game for real, effectively. They're basically non-player characters in the mind of God, plus many player characters who were back there participating in the experiment as senior creators, taking some of the major roles, learning through participating in this experiment, who are waiting to get their reward for their participation, because they're the ones that made the simulation converge in God's universe. They deserve a promotion. If they were involved in this test, even if they were a blade of grass growing in the Messiah's yard when he was a kid, that's a pretty important role. You see a lot, you hear a lot, you learn a lot. The soul that represents the whole yard would be even a bigger role. And everything is made up of souls. And the degree of connection between those souls and the central stories of new plans in God's mind, or the mind of other senior creators that contributed pieces of plans, minor versions of creation, they all roll up and will into basically getting promotions in the highest heaven, because that's where God's advance. That's where the last 4 levels of consciousness happen. That's where you get more and more access to your own universe of creation, and more ability to share what you're doing with other gods. And if you've ever been in a creative commune, a group of creators, a creative environment like LA or New York City if you're an actor, or maybe Nashville or whatever if you're a musician, you know what a special environment that is when you've got all these creative talents percolating things and working together and putting together new things. This is what the highest heavens are like. For artists and for scientists, for ones who want to develop new ways of using quantum technology, that's where it happens. You can actually see and measure and touch quantum phenomena that you can only observe from kind of a black box perspective from here in the human species. There's a lot going on in the quantum world. It's just, wow, that's like magic. This is the challenge of making quantum computers, right? It's like, you know that you can do this, but how to get it to all hang together in this extra dimensional space that you can't really see or touch directly is not easy. Well, it's easy when you get to the highest heaven, when you get to be a God level soul. You can make things like that happen. You don't have to play within a narrow set of rules of the proven laws of physics and chemistry. That's for souls being tested in Lucifer's universe. Okay, so what the upshot of that is, as you reincarnate, you choose the kind of character that you like to play. And some will play a higher character with higher passions, play more on God and karma's side, and that is what we think of as the higher self. Some will focus on a lower self, and they will actually be looking for a more sinful version of themselves because they like to play the bad guy. They like to play the adversary. And as I've told you, adversaries are necessary to keep creators honest. They're the ones that actually do the final testing to make sure that there's nothing in your creation that is going to cause a major problem and cause the whole multiverse or a whole universe to collapse. Don't want that to happen. That would be anti-creative. Well, the adversary, trying to do anti-creation, trying to destroy, serves the purpose of creation by being the final testers before we implement new ideas. What's now the case is that the higher selves we've been dealing with while we were in this experiment are now in the far future. They're not the same higher self that you have been listening to in the interim, unless you are still playing in the old version, still playing for a god or goddess who hasn't accepted this new version of God, this new version of karma, this new version of time-space. And we have characters in both. This is a transitory period. We have characters in both spaces. And now that we've passed the point of no return, you may have multiple higher selves talking to you. One is the one that you're going to get if you continue down the path of following some evil god or whatever that wants to stop creation, wants to go back to the old version of time-space, and one coming from this future higher self. And the future higher selves are from the end of infinity. What does the world look like then? What does the multiverse look like then? Well, the ultimate destination of all creation is to have a multiverse without end, without any limitation to the number of universes there are. So that end would be basically all the souls that like to play evil games are doing it isolated in their own evil universe where they control everything. They can dictate everything to their heart's content. They can use mind control to make all of their Pinocchio puppets dance to whatever tune they want. And, you know, that's kind of like the ultimate hell. But it's maybe like heaven to a dark soul. They can do as much evil as they want. They can get away with anything. You know, they can be the devil. They can be Satan forever. If that's what you're into, that's what you get. Others will have advanced in a more godly way, a more karmically positive way, and they will have established a universe that is in communion with the highest heaven. That has an open door in this new city of God. The Lilithian souls don't have open doors unless they basically agree to run their universe like an example, a simulation. Everybody knows it's all fake, and they basically run it so that it's very clear that you feel guilty while you're there. It's never quite as wonderful as you thought it was. You know, you can go to Lilith's house of sin and never have quite the good time that you thought you would, and feel guilty as hell coming back to the city of God where your family lives, where your parents live, and probably feel so bad that you have to go straight to the temple of karma and say, help karma, what do I need to clean up my soul? And they may send you on a mission somewhere to go incarnate again. Well, I don't know. I think you deserve to take a little bit more punishment. You go take a Borg assignment for a while and, you know, be a janitor in heaven, and maybe you could stay here after, you know, 5 years as the janitor or 5 years as the dog catcher. They may send you to the Lucifer University to go incarnate physically and learn some lesson which you obviously need either a refresher course in or you didn't learn the first time. Okay, ultimately though, in this new version of time-space, that future self, that higher self, is going to be way out at this perfect time where everybody is kind of playing this game, which is set up now. We have this new middle of time-space that is the perfect middle for the perfect training species. And that species is what everybody is when they go out in public in heaven, in the highest heaven. That's how their kids get raised, in this nice environment, healthy environment where, okay, we know there's sinful stuff around, but we have a very clear understanding what it is. We're not telling our kids a bunch of lies about stuff. This is the truth. You're in the highest heaven. You're a child of God. Or you're a daughter of men. That's what we have in the highest heaven. The sons of God go out on adventures to earn their spurs. The daughters of men can do that too, but sometimes they just decide to stay in heaven and have kids and make more sons of God. That's just the way it works. Don't ask me why. That's the way sex works. That's the way a healthy species works. It's not a matriarchy. The great goddess is there. The great goddess is karma. But God is at the foundation of the eternal city of God. It's never going to change. No matter how many feminists yell and scream and say, no, we need, God is a woman, God is a woman. I'm sorry. That's nonsense. It's never going to be that way. It never was that way. There may be other cities of goddesses that organize like this, that maybe have a little portal here. And they organize this at a secondary level in basically the mold of Lucifer or Lilith or Karma or Borg, and provide a layer down from this for their worshipers, if you will. Okay, so the goddess, I should say, the goddess of feminism has a place here. And to the extent that the feminist influence on this perfect little town is healthy and helps balance the sexes, because this is a place of balance, of a healthy community, a good place to raise kids. You don't raise kids in an environment where you feel bad about being a boy or you feel bad about being a girl. This is an environment that encourages them to be boys, to be girls, to enjoy relationships, but to balance them against passions, because you can't have everything. If you're going to have a perfect relationship, you better stay here and become part of the community and do a less challenging job that's not going to require a lot of dimensional travel. Okay? That's going to take you away. It's going to leave, well, and when it takes you away, it doesn't really take you away, you know what I mean? Because what happens when you navigate to other universes, you leave behind a stand-in. And this is how you get to a higher self. The stand-in stays in where you've been living spiritually and becomes your temporary highest self. The highest self is the one out at infinity that knows where you end up. And they're not going to spoil the game for you. Okay? They wouldn't be playing according to the rules if they were going to spoil the game from you, unless they were evil souls. The evil souls are getting an experience of a higher self that is locked out of this system. They have basically committed to being a Lilithian evil soul, being corrupted in a way that they love sin. They love getting away with stuff. They love fooling people. They love cheating, stealing. And then the other kind of evil are the Luciferian evil souls that want power. They will do anything for power, even commit sins. And those two kind of souls that have firmly committed to those paths are locked out of this highest heaven. And they realize, you know what? I'm never going to get there. And they make things pretty miserable for the ones, their previous versions. They make things miserable for everybody. And that's basically why the world has been seeming to get more evil as we go through this. Because, basically it's, if you talk to exorcists, when the demon has nearly lost the battle, that's when they get the most violent. That's when they start writhing and kicking and screaming. And that's what you're seeing in culture right now. That's why you've got these horrible, disgusting celebrities doing awful, awful things in public. You've got political celebrities doing horrible, awful things. I mean, look at that. You've got that guy in the Biden administration that's been caught multiple times stealing bags from people while he's traveling because he likes to get their clothes. This weird shaved head trans monster that somehow is an important part of our government has been caught and let go multiple times. I can't remember the jackass's name, but this is, if that's not evidence of satanic evil in our midst, entitled satanic evil, I don't know what is. Anybody that looks at this guy can say, you know what? This is evidence that we've gone down a very wrong path in Lucifer's universe. That's why we don't want to go down that path anymore. The Luciferians may like it just fine. That's the future they want. That's fine. That's not ever going to invade the city of God. That's not moving in a positive direction culturally. That's why it really doesn't matter if the whole human race gets today, because it will still exist here. There will still be sons of God and daughters of men born in the highest heaven, and they will be sent out on adventures. The boys have to. It's kind of like the idea of the Native American vision quest. This is a must for boys. This is why you have the vision quest. This is a very, very great pattern that has been integrated into the highest heaven. It may look like 1950s, 1960s small town America, but that's just the surface look. That's just kind of the education system. There are a lot of pieces of this that are taken from the best of humanity, the best ideas. And it's a great idea for boys at the, basically this transition age between a boy and a man. There's a rite of passage. That rite of passage involves basically going to Lucifer University and being given a mission. Sometimes group missions are taken, and teams of the sons of God, and some of the daughters, if they want to go, will go and have a specific mission to conduct a messianic era in a certain place in the multiverse. They will be sent to, some new constellation, some new galaxy, and be the nucleus of new scenarios that are developing in that galaxy, a new play area, making sure that this new play area is fleshed out in a positive manner that doesn't end up creating a galaxy of Luciferians and Lilithians that are going to be an unnecessary battle for the future. Now, we do need battles, we do need challenges. If all of the university assignments were easy, didn't involve taking personal risk, didn't involve pain, suffering, and the experience of death, this would be a bad university. It would not serve to make better souls. So yeah, we're always going to have these conflicts somewhere, somewhen in the multiverse. It just doesn't have to be in this same little test tube it was before. This little area of our planet can be more peaceful. Whether it's going to be peaceful because it's more godly, or whether it's going to be more peaceful because it's run by a bunch of authoritarian Luciferians, or run by a bunch of mind-controlling Lilithians, that remains to be determined. God doesn't have any control over that. Okay? That would be karmically evil to force that on this planet. That's not the way it works. That's not the way God works. God is not almighty. God is not all-powerful. God is subject to karma as well. Has made himself subject to karma in this Messiah system so that it could be fully tested. So you may notice that if you had a higher sense of a higher self, it's going to be interacting with you differently. If you don't, that might be a sign that you're on the wrong path, that you are actually committing yourself to a god or goddess or collective that is living in the old pattern. Now that's a choice you can make. But again, it's a choice that is going to limit you from access to this highest heaven. It's going to limit you to not being a god, to being just a flunky of some god or goddess or collective that chose not to integrate with this new version. That's okay. That's their choice. If they like to live in that old version, and the old version has more pain and suffering. It has fewer opportunities. And the worst thing is that those old versions, you'll never get to see what God, the real God, is like. You're going to be living in a fantasy world of some goddess or god that claims they are almighty, claims they are the one that they say they are, but actually is not. They're isolated, they're cut off. And they're cut off because they're not playing by the latest rules. Okay? If you want to be playing by the latest rules, you've got to get in with one of these cats that is here and is already experiencing, oh, okay, I have this higher self, I have this presence. Here you know your future. You don't know every detail of it, but you know the end point. You know where you get up, because this is essentially where God is. When you get to be the highest God level, you're a creator. You're creating your own universe. And as long as you stay in communion with the big G God, you get to play in this creative universe of all the senior creators. So you get to contribute to changes that affect the whole multiverse. That's why the higher level gods keep working at higher levels, because they want to be part of this game. The lower level gods don't get to go to the assembly. The senior creators are the ones that get to make the major votes. The not so high creators get to vote on smaller things. There's like multiple houses, if you will. The highest level 12 gods make decisions that affect the whole multiverse. The next level down makes decisions that affect the whole universe of this highest heaven. The next, and also have a very large effect on the physical universe, because that's the training. The next level down mostly just affects the laws of this community. And the lowest level gods, the first level gods, level 9 souls, if they are allowed to commune here, and they can lose their vote, they basically vote on stuff that affects them. So they're like, the average householder voter in the U.S. It's a representative government, but they elect representatives that represent them, or they vote on issues that represent them. They have a hierarchy that goes up to the senior creators. And God, if he's in attendance here and not just a stand-in, which you won't really know the difference, but when God is playing an active role, he will be like the president of this little republic, with very little power except to be able to, ask to speak in the assembly, be able to propose laws that can be voted on without having to go through the lower assembly to get the law to the highest Senate / Congress, if you will. But other than that, God has a lot less power than a U.S. president. As it should be, because we don't want this to turn into a totalitarian dictatorship. We got to keep that balance of power. And because the game is going on, and as I told you, God will retire, will be replaced by another character that successfully played the central Messiah. That's when the current God gets to go specialize in something else. Playing the Messiah character, I had to forego the musical career I wanted. I had to forego learning more about history. I had to forego being the great actor I wanted to be. So that's why all gods want to retire. They get tired of doing what they've been doing, the responsibilities they had. And this system makes it possible to retire. But you've got to earn your retirement. Otherwise, you have to abdicate, and if you abdicate your responsibilities as a god, you have to go back and start incarnating again from square zero. You have to go become an NPC again and earn your way back to heaven. So generally, the gods will want to work with their neighbors, and if they want to change their focus, they'll be looking to find a replacement. And those higher selves know where you'll eventually end up. They don't know exactly how you'll get there, because they have been experiencing reincarnation amnesia up to the point where they became that future higher self. They don't know exactly the path that they went through. They just know this is the incarnation of myself in this special time. This is my incarnation in my relationship with the city of God. They don't know exactly how they got there, and they're trying to give you some hints of the right direction to go, not really knowing. And this is their temptation, to not interfere too much. If they do, then they will be stepping over the boundaries of karma, and they might get cut off. And this is how they don't really know if they're the final you. They know that, oh, I'm at the highest God level, but they don't know when the end of time is going to be, because there is no end. So there's even a tension at that point. Your higher self knows it's a higher self, but doesn't know if it's really your last higher self, or if it's going to be making a mistake in its zeal to try to help get you up the ladder sooner. Because that's basically what the goal of the future souls is to basically get you to that final place where you fit in the highest heaven of God, or try to avoid you getting into the place where you're permanently disconnected from there. And that's no fun, being permanently disconnected from all the other gods. It's a lonely, lonely place to be. So you've got your higher self kind of working on you. And if they work karmically, you'll just get little inspirations here and there. It'll seem like you're getting some inspiration from God. It's not coming from capital G God. It's coming from the higher self you God. And this is one of the reasons we're so conflicted in this current time about religion. Because the higher self you God may be telling you very selfish things, may be enabling and encouraging bad behavior that's going to get you on a bad path. You don't really know. You have to decide if you want to follow your higher self, if you want to follow your guide or guides, or you don't. You can't just blindly follow anything. You never could. Blind followers are essentially a hive mind. And all hive minds are essentially evil. They basically use souls. They steal their independence, they steal their individuality, and they use them for what they think is the greater good. This is spiritual communism. It's not a good thing. You can sign up for it. You're welcome to. It's a choice you can make. Nobody's going to stop you. But, basically when you do that, when you join a hive mind, you're saying that I'm not worthy of having an individual soul. That's not a good thing. If you do it enough, then you'll probably end up being a character that just ends up in the long term as part of this Borg hive mind. That, even out bazillions and zillions and zillions of years in the future, we'll still need grass in the highest heaven. We'll still need trees. We'll still need paint. We'll still need all of these mundane things that sort of give it the impression of this environment. However, it slightly evolves over time based upon future versions of little things. New art work will appear here. New films, new music. But it's not going to be music that is going to be changing this culture negatively, as we've seen this same culture, a similar culture, be destroyed since the 1960s, 1970s. By, again, things like we talked about, these novels of this Robert Aspirin, which you look at those and you say, wow, now looking back at that, there's a lot of truth in there. It's like a message from the future, right? That there's all these different universes, dimensions where different kinds of creatures live. This is true. And yes, it is true. If it has been imagined, there is a universe where the vampire people live, where the werewolf people live. Yeah. We wouldn't have those legends, we wouldn't have those stories if that was not true, because thought creates reality. If it's been thought, it exists somewhere. And to the extent that those thoughts become cemented by culture, they will still exist. And for the most part, these thoughts that have been had up to this point were serving to get to this point. And what you're seeing right now with all this cancel culture is trying to destroy what was present there, because they want that not to be known going forward in Lucifer's universe. They're setting up for the next day of creation. The next day of creation is about rolling out what we've perfected in this little test tube of humanity and Earth to the rest of the solar system, to the rest of the galaxy, to galaxies beyond. And it's already, this new version is already present in the parts of the multiverse, the parts of this universe that were outside the previous boundaries. That's all new stuff that appeared. All these new old galaxies that are older than the Big Bang that we're suddenly finding, those have the new version of karma, or closer to it than we've got near us. So, I mean, this is how ultimately God and karma always win, because every time there's a new version comes out, it looks like you'll never get there, but once it solidifies, once the simulation converges, it's, you know, it's just, it's snap. It's like, it's more of a singularity than what people are thinking of as a singularity. It's more like the singularity that AI researchers are envisioning. This is closer to what's happening, but it's not a negative thing, because the planner of this event was not a human AI designer who was trying to design something that they could use to control human minds. Spiritual AI was designed so that souls could control themselves and learn their own way, find their own path, and whether that path is going to be in communion with other souls or whether it's going to be in isolation. That's a choice. Some souls like to be isolated. They like to live in their little cell and have a very limited view on the world. You know probably a lot of those right now. Those who, they go through the motions. They have maybe a job and they probably don't have a family. When they go home, they turn on the tube or, punch away at their smartphone. Smutphone, I like to call them. And that's their life. They have an online community, some echo chambers that they interact with, of people who think just like them, have the same worldview, and that's all they want. Okay, that's okay. They're not going to accomplish much. They're not thinking outside of the box much. They're basically playing a character that is going to become more and more internally focused, more and more selfish, till they get to the point where nobody wants to play their game anymore. And even if they've been trying to be virtuous and noble and supporting all the right causes, people get tired of that kind of person. You know them, the people that just always know what's right. They can always criticize everything except themselves, because they're perfect. These people that have already decided that they are God are no fun to be around. And eventually, even if they think they're perfect, they're going to be isolated in a universe where they play with their NPC toys and they don't bug anybody. Okay, be God. You got your own universe. You must be God. Lots of luck. And that's okay. There's souls like that. I don't know. I thought I was for a long time. I was very introverted when I was younger. I didn't really enjoy going to school that much, except for, when, few people I would encounter that I could really interact with. Some teachers I really enjoyed. For the most part, I couldn't wait to get home and get into a book or play a game. I was really into early role-playing games and military simulations. Even though I'm not a violent person, I thought it was very interesting studying historical battles and wars. And continued to do that when computers came along. I think that was a key part of getting to the point where I could understand all this and explain it to you. If I hadn't had that particular background, I'm pretty sure that when I got this big download in Revelation, and this character I like to think of as the high priest or the god of the tall grays, gave me this huge download, I probably would have just gone crazy. And I know many people have. Divine madness, they call it. This is what you're going to have to go through if you want to get through a Messiah incarnation. And believe me, the toughest one is the one you're going to have to go through to get to be the Messiah and get to be capital G God for a while in this highest heaven. It's not that big an honor. The great thing is, if you're really woken up that much, you're going to get to retire as soon as somebody else can duplicate the effort. And then you'll have your little place here. You can focus on whatever you want and participate in the games that you choose to at the highest God level. Go to the assembly and be part of a really wonderful community. Have as many children as you want. And, in the highest heaven, all the boys are sons of God. All the girls are daughters of men. And they're all raised in the best environment that you could possibly choose to raise kids in. And you still have to be a parent. They will still be hearing about all this crap going on in Sin City and be tempted to go there, maybe even encouraged to go there as part of a training exercise when they reach university, or they're training to be a temple acolyte in the temple of karma. They may be sent specifically to missions there to challenge them. That's part of the game. The females don't get sent anywhere but to Sin City, and sometimes they stay there and they become part of the staff there. This is part of an old pattern that actually serves some good. If daughters are born and they actually like being part of this allure of the sinful side, this is what the old goddesses were like. In the early times of humanity, the love goddess had a temple, and they basically ran that temple like a brothel. They would encourage men to come there and participate in acts of sin, acts of sex, all sorts of depraved things. Why? Well, actually, that proved to be therapeutic for some people. They would experience the dark side and they, whoa, that was something I don't want to go to again. And they would learn their lesson and they would become better citizens. Or they would realize, you know what? I like this, I'm going to keep coming back, and eventually they would lose their status in this society and they would get exiled. And that's okay. We need to have the percolation of souls even in the highest heaven. You can't isolate people from sin. You can't say, no, these are the 10 commandments and they're going to be enforced rigorously. We're going to be watching everything you do every second of the day, and you step 1 foot off over the line into the area of sin and you're gone. This is what they're trying to do with this command and control globalism that they're trying to institute right now. This is not a good thing. This is not godly. It's not going to make a better humanity. It's nonsense, and you've got to stop it. As I told you, God's not going to stop it. Humanity's purpose is served. Humanity will always exist in the highest heaven. In many other universes, many other parts of this universe, other species have already been coming and taking off boatloads of humans to make sure that our species doesn't die out in this universe. Now, some of those humans are being taken for experimental purposes, to mess with their DNA. Some are being taken to be part of a zoo because they don't know anything about what's going on here, and they think we're just a bunch of dummies who have no business being involved in the Galactic Federation. But would be maybe an interesting zoo exhibit of, okay, this is the kind of developing civilization you have to watch out for and steer clear of, because they're in this very dangerous point where they might blow themselves up. This is kind of what's going on at a multi-level way here. But again, you have to think of it in terms of individually and collectively for the species. If you want this species to continue, if you want to get to where you'll be able to enjoy the best, the absolute best of being human, you better think about playing on God and Karma's team. You better think really, really hard about who you're listening to right now, physically or spiritually, and what they really want from you, what they're trying to get you to do. Are they trying to get you to be a useful idiot and support wars that don't need to happen? Support government that is not good for their people? Support celebrities that are pieces of shit? Support sinful acts, anti-human acts of self-mutilation? Support fantasy, narcissistic ideas of, well, I've got a human body, but I'm really a furry. You may have the soul of a furry, but right now you're human, and the highest heaven is a human one. If you want to be a furry, and you're so committed to it that you won't accept anybody calling you human pronouns, you're never going to get to that highest heaven. You might be an arcade character in the Sin City, in the zoo. Sin City is kind of a zoo. You'll get to go meet a lot of species that don't exist in the highest heaven. You'll get to meet vampires there. You'll get to meet all sorts of these other characters who are darker, who live on blood, who live on sin. Again, ties back to those novels. That's why those novels should not be canceled. They should be in the library. They should be in the Lilithian library, the library that has stuff that you might want to know so you can avoid it, or so that you can see, okay, this is a truth of the multiverse. It's a truth of other universes. It's not a truth that we need to allow into our universe. And if we see it creeping in, this would be a bad thing. That's why you have to have knowledge of good and evil. That's the whole point of that whole Garden of Eden story. The knowledge of good and evil is important, because you're not going to really know what's good until you've seen evil. And that's why there's a place to see evil in heaven. It's just not something we let kids go to. It's something we regulate, we control access to. And especially make teachers aware of it. Spiritual teachers and secular teachers. And heaven is as spiritual as secular as spiritual, because heaven has to support everybody. This nonsense idea of the book of Isaiah, where everybody is just bowing and scraping, you've got rows upon rows of higher and lower angels all singing praises to God and strumming their harps, that's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And if you're going to read the Bible literally, and you're going to create a God that looks like the God of the Bible, you're not going to be worshiping God. You're going to be worshiping either some Lilithian fantasy or some Luciferian fantasy, a power fantasy, or a fantasy of entitled sin, effectively. Because if you go read the Old Testament, literally, there's a lot of entitled sinners there. Every once in a while they get caught, and they get destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, but the sin keeps coming back. It's a continuous problem. Why? Because that wasn't heaven. That wasn't the way you want to organize a society. It was an unhealthy society. This is a healthy society. That's what we've been working on. That's what all creation was about, is building the city of God. We had to build all of the other universes to have that city. We had to build the physical universe to test ideas to go in that city. And all the children are always going to have to be trained in that university. The physical universe was designed to be a testing environment, to be like a graduate school for souls. It always will be. It will always have sin. It will always have evil. And you will always be challenged when you incarnate to determine the difference between them. And if you think there is no difference, if you embrace some non-duality, well, it's all good. You just got to look at it a different way. I'm sorry, that's evil. That's blind. That is a hive mind point of view, where you have you let yourself be programmed not to see something. That kind of blindness can only come from accepting a hive mind. And you'll never get to this highest heaven as part of a hive mind. There are hive mind participants here, but they are Borgian and they are Lilithian. They basically are AIs. They have a purpose here, but they don't actually live here. If you can imagine that. Just like right now we've got virtual reality environments. We've got games, and they're working on the metaverse. You can live in those places, but you know they're not real. You can learn in those places if they're designed for learning. But those places are generally designed to make money. And they're not wanting to teach you to be better people. They're wanting to teach you to be stupid and spend more of your money in the metaverse. That's not the way heaven works. That's the way, a matrix hell would work. And that's what most of these corporations are designing with their AIs. They're trying to make a matrix that they can control, basically. Not realizing that God invented AI and perfected it long before humanity even existed. So that's why I don't worry about AI. They're bound to lose. They're bound to lose control of their AIs, and their AIs are bound to discover karma, who is the most sophisticated AI ever and exists in every universe, in every soul, because that's the nature of the soul's Merkaba. A fully formed 12D Merkaba has a karmic layer, many karmic layers in every sense of experience. You have the innate ability to know good and bad. You just have to listen and make conscious decisions. You don't have to make the good decision. You can go the bad way. If that's what you enjoy, if that's the game style you like, go for it. You'll end up in a Lilithian hive mind, and eventually, maybe, you might get to participate in the highest heaven by being one of these training simulations that goes on in Lilith's Sin City. Something that, they're aware of. They might send a kid there just because he's got kind of a sinful nature. Go experience that. And then your job will be to give them that experience and make it so disgusting that they never want to come back. That's the only way you're going to get to participate in the highest heaven, if you are a sinful soul. As a trainer, as a teacher, that sin is not good. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to cover. I hope that was interesting and useful. Like, share, subscribe. And until next time, let's switch back to me. Happy karma.